Right, hi everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Tap HR podcast. I still can't believe that I'm on 12 episodes, and every week, every time I do it, I seem really surprised, but I am. It's awesome, it's great. So welcome everybody. So we now do this via a podcast, and we also cover the footage and have it on YouTube too, so you can watch the footage and you can also listen in. So today I'm joined by the fabulous Aneta, and Aneta is an expert on all things diversity and inclusion. So we're going to have a really good conversation about how that can work for SMEs and companies in general. Aneta is an expert, as I say. She's worked in kind of commercial and creative organisations, both in the UK and internationally. She's an avid traveller, so she's been travelling around the world of late, and she's agreed to share her expertise. So welcome to the podcast, Aneta.
Thank you so much, Trish. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's going to be great. Yay! And coordinator today with a uniform.
Oh, well, great minds think alike.
I was about to say that as well. That's so awesome. So first question then. So just kind of stripping it back and going right back to the beginning. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about kind of D&I or DE&I or diversity and belonging, kind of what are we talking about and what do those things mean?
So if you are new to D&I, it can feel like a really different language. There's lots of buzzwords, lots of terminologies, lots of abbreviations that we use. And language is, always evolving. So first we had something called equal opportunities. Then it turned into diversity and inclusion, which is the D&I. And then now most recently, we talk about DEI. And I think it's really important that, we kind of clarify what those terms, these abbreviations really mean, because if you don't understand it, it's easy to sort of think about the term as one thing and only just one thing. But those letters stand for something different, and each has sort of a special relevance and meaning. So D stands for diversity, and that refers to the range of differences that make us who we are, makes us unique individuals. And that's whether that's gender, whether that's race, nationality, disability, gender identification, our religious beliefs, our learning styles and preferences, socioeconomic status, etc. So that's about diversity. When we say diversity, we don't refer to an individual. So you wouldn't necessarily say, such and such person is a diverse individual. We refer to groups of people or to companies or teams. So that team is diverse or that company is diverse. Mm-hmm. Then E stands for equity, and it's sometimes mistaken for equality. And those two terms are very sort of similar, but they're actually very different. And that difference is really important. So equality is about treating everybody the same, giving everybody the same opportunities, resources, support, etc. But equity, it's about distributing those resources, that's support or training based on need, because not everybody needs the same thing. Mm-hmm. And we don't live in meritocracy, and we need to acknowledge that some groups have historically had less access to opportunities, less privilege, less resources that was available to them. So a good example of thinking about equity and equality would be recently, the government gave everybody in the UK £400 rebate on energy. So everybody was given that amount of money, irrespective of whether you are rich, whether you are poor, when you have one house or a few houses, everybody gets it. And not everybody needs it. And it's an example of equality, mm-hmm. giving everybody the same amount of financial support. Whereas another example of equity would be recently companies have decided to give employees earning under a certain threshold a one-off cost of living payment. And that's an example of equity. So giving that additional support or resources in this situation to those who are needed the most. Mm-hmm. So that's equity. And then the last letter is I, which stands for inclusion. And inclusion is about behaviors. It's an act of welcoming and supporting, respecting and valuing people to make them feel safe. And it's about giving everybody the same rights and opportunities to progress, to contribute, etc. And the outcome of inclusion is that people feel that they can be themselves at work. Mm-hmm. And that's what we call belonging, which is another letter that often comes up as part of those acronyms within diversity and inclusion. So I think it's really important to start from understanding differences between those words, those letters, because they really require different actions. Mm-hmm. So equity and inclusion is about behavior and act, and it's really important because it's about the fundamental question of, do we want to treat our people fairly and well? And I think most companies would say, yes, of course we do.
And another kind of word or term that I see kind of bandied about quite a lot is an intersectionality. So what exactly does that mean in practice?
So intersectionality is an acknowledgement that we all have multiple identities. We're not a monolith, right? So some of those identities may give us certain privileges and advantages, and others may contribute to some unique challenges that we may be facing, or barriers or prejudice in the workplace. So for example, I'm not just a woman, right? I'm also a white, able-bodied, educated immigrant woman of a certain age. And for example, you could have a black man, but they may be a young black Muslim gay man with ADHD and caring responsibilities. So you can see very quickly how we're not just one person, very one-dimensional person. We are actually made up of a number of identities, and understanding intersectionality and those multiple identities really helps us understand each other much better. And helps us find more of a common ground with one another. And it matters because in the workplace, we know from research that certain sort of groups, even within that sort of, let's just say, gender or racial groups, have less opportunities afforded to them. So understanding that kind of deep dive into those identities, what they actually represent, whether that's advantage or disadvantage, is really important.
So practically, how can businesses go about doing that deep dive into those different identities? Because obviously we're all individual or really different. Those two examples that you gave were kind of very different as well. As a business, practically, how can I go about figuring out what people's kind of layers are in the way that you described it, and what and how does that help me as a business if I start looking into those kind of things?
I think you always start from kind of opening up a conversation, because people often are willing to share a bit more about themselves than you may think as a business, as a business leader. So opening up a conversation about saying on a certain topic, let's just say anything to do with inclusion and experience of an employee in a workplace, they will tell you that, for example, as a woman from this community, or as a working mom, here is some of the challenges I'm facing, and you're starting to really unpeel and understand what's happening for that individual. And you can, from a company perspective, you can sort of start thinking about how you can use that information. So for example, if you were designing, so let's just say, a developmental program for women in the workplace, because you've just noticed that women are not given enough opportunities to be mentored and sponsored, etc., and you are rolling out this sort of program to everybody, what you may not realize is that some women historically have had less access to opportunities such as mentoring and sponsorships, whereas others, for them, that wasn't a problem. So you're actually giving the same solution to people who may actually not need it. So understanding those sort of layers of intersectionality is really important, to acknowledge that actually maybe we need to do something a little bit more targeted that would have a bigger impact and get to the root of the cause, rather than approach resolutions with a sort of more of a blanket approach.
So, I mean, I think I got a bit excited there, and I moved quite into what people can do. But why, in general, and in particular SMEs? So, why should SMEs be bothered about diversity and inclusion in your view?
Well, SMEs are the lifeblood of UK economy, and they, I think, account for over 95% of whole business population. So that's about almost 6 million businesses in the UK. They employ a lot of people, and also they provide a lot of products and services to a lot of people in the community in the UK at large. So if your business isn't diverse and inclusive, what you're doing is limiting your profits and your growth potential. You're missing out on all those ideas, creativity, innovative solutions, and access to your customers and users if in the communities that you don't reflect internally. Because we know from research, and all the research says the same thing, that diverse, inclusive companies are much more profitable, they perform better, And they also have an easier time recruiting and retaining great talent. So people really want to work for companies which are inclusive and diverse, where they can sort of feel they can belong and they can see themselves becoming successful. And in turn, that is about providing opportunities for companies to be much more innovative and more successful. So if you are a business that wants to attract great talent, and that wants to be known for being innovative, progressive, wants to grow and be more profitable, you really need to start caring about diversity and inclusion, because that's your key to it.
Mm. And when should SMEs start thinking about diversity and inclusion? So I think about kind of when I go out networking, I meet companies that are at various different stages of growth, and they're starting to think about this kind of thing, or they think they're going to think about it when they are employing more people, or and they're at a certain stage. But when realistically should companies be thinking about kind of diversity and inclusion?
I would say right from the outset. I think it's really far easier to implement diversity, equity and inclusion when you are a small company, and when you are just starting out. So as and when you're starting to hire more people, more teams, you are thinking about launching new products or new services, you are starting to introduce sort of new policies and practices into your workplace. And that is the time where you really need to start thinking about diversity and inclusion and equity, and making sure that whatever you put in place, those foundations that you lay down, are inclusive and equitable and appeal to everybody equally. So I would say it's far easier to introduce diversity and inclusion to smaller companies than it is to actually do so in bigger organizations, which tend to be much more set in their ways. They are a bit change resistant, and that change can actually take far longer than for smaller businesses. And you can reap benefits of diversity and inclusion much quicker as well. So things that we talked about innovation and creativity, those ideas, growth and profit, you can really accelerate the growth of your business if you start thinking about inclusion and diversity much sooner.
And another thing that I wanted to have a chat with you about is kind of authenticity. So I had an experience working for a company where they were putting together marketing materials, and they were wanting to put together a video, and there were only certain individuals who looked like me working in the organization. So I was pretty much in every single shot because it made it seem as though they were a diverse organization. And to me, that it kind of missed that authenticity piece. And really, for me, I guess as a HR person, I wanted to understand why I was the only person in the room that looked like me, and what was stopping people from, feeling as though they belonged and wanting to join us. So is there anything that you think it's worth kind of covering around authenticity and making sure that people aren't just doing things and ticking a box, but they are being authentic with their kind of D&I strategy and the way that they work?
It's a really good point, Trish, because a lot of companies focus on what I call on superficial diversity and inclusion. And your point around shooting marketing materials and being on the face of a brochure, a company website, for example, is what's seen as a sort of easy and quick win. But scratch the surface, and perhaps underneath it looks very different. I think there is a danger for companies that focus on that very superficial, marketing, PR, or events only, D&I, to fall flat on the face, because within the company, employees will see through it. What you really need is that authenticity of what is it that you're trying to do with your business. So find the reason why you want to invest in inclusion and diversity. What's not working, what's missing, and start from there. It has to be authentic. It has to come from within. Otherwise, it's like copying and pasting from another business or from another company, and thinking, oh, let's just cross our fingers and hope that it will work out for the best. Those tactics tend to fail very quickly, because people don't engage with it and see through it. If it's inauthentic, or if it's only for show, that kind of superficial veneer quickly peels off. So I think your point about authenticity is really, really important. Companies need to think deeply about why is it that they want to invest in inclusion and diversity, and think about how they can develop a strategy to get them there, starting from acknowledging, where they are at. So what's the current reality? Where are opportunities? Where are some of the challenges and barriers? And then taking kind of each step one at a time, rather than rushing into doing something quick and dirty, as sometimes can be the case, or something for show that is going to be very superficial, very disappointing, and it will be a bit of a, you know, a one hot minute, but actually will not have any lasting impact or effect.
And I guess, sorry, I keep going on about my personal experiences. Another experience I've had is working for a very, very large organization who were very, very well intentioned, and they had lots of kind of different groups that you could join and lots of different meetings that you could join based on your ethnicity. So there was a group for kind of the Black members of staff, a group for the Asian members of staff, a group for everything basically. And whilst I totally appreciate that for some individuals that works, and we were talking about earlier, everybody's different, kind of different needs. For me personally, I felt really quite boxed in, and I wanted to feel as though I belonged to the whole organisation and not just the one bit that I'm very proud of. Don't get me wrong, I'm very proud of who I am and where I've come from. But I wanted to interact with everyone. I didn't just fit in a box and seen as one thing and that be the only thing that kind of makes me who I am. So what advice would you give to companies who are kind of thinking about doing that kind of thing? Obviously wanting to be authentic in the way that we've described, but may have people like me who feel as though kind of putting me in that box isn't really what I want. I want kind of wider kind of exposure, and I want to feel as though I belong.
And this is where the whole point of intersectionality really comes out, because if you don't see people as having a number of identities and multidimensional, it's so easy to start those working groups, those kind of employee resource groups, as we call them, or employee networks, based on a single characteristics, and really forget that we are actually much more complex human beings than that. And I think historically companies that have done so have realized along the journey that actually those groups may not always work for everybody, because we're not just a monolith, we're not just kind of singular identity. Where I saw employee resource groups work really well is where they were purely voluntary. So people wanted to join one because they felt that they really want to contribute to either the topic or be part of the support group that group was sort of set up for. And they had a very clear purpose for being. So there's two types of employee resource groups. One is that's formed just purely for community of support. So it's a safe place for people to come together, to share their experience, to exchange some tips. So I can think of an example from my previous company when we had a very active parent group, and we had a lot of people from, who have become parents because of various circumstances, or were trying to become parents, and everybody was very supportive and of one another, and that helped people feel like they can belong to the company, and that company really cares for them and provides them with a safe space to really talk about their personal issues. There's also sort of a second or different way of setting up sort of business resource groups or employee resource groups, and that's about forming those groups to develop a strategy for change. So that's very much more aligned to a business reason. Sometimes we call them committees, and you can see sometimes that these members of those committees are one of the most engaged people in the whole of the business, because they really care about the issue, the topic that group is trying to tackle. They also, as a group, can provide you with an opportunity to stretch yourself outside of your day job. So give that kind of personal and professional opportunity for growth and development. So I think there are some good reasons for those business groups, those resource groups to really exist in organizations, but how they're set up and what the purpose is needs to be super clear. And I think the main thing is they need to be voluntary. You can't force anybody to join a group just because they fit a certain narrative, a certain characteristic that you may feel that's what they need. It has to be coming from within yourself. And actually, for those groups to be working effectively, they have to be genuine and authentic, and they will evolve in time. I have seen in my time a group that has evolved because there was a particular need in the organization around mental health and well-being. And we had a huge amount of people wanting to be part of that group. And they were super effective for a couple of years, and then things have tailed off because mental health and well-being have sort of become a normal part and parcel of the everyday work, and people didn't feel that in the group to come to or a special place to talk about mental health and well-being. It became just a normal language that was used every day, and it's just a I guess, the power of employee resource groups that can impact the culture in a very healthy and positive way. So whilst I can see why you may have felt uncomfortable or boxed in or forced into it, and that's never a good way of introducing anybody to any group, I can see that with, you know, with good intentions and some proper structure and clarity around the scope, they can work.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really good practical advice. And even just that point of just being really clear about your purpose.
Yeah.
If I was joining a group because I knew I was going to get X out of it, great. But when it is just about your particular characteristic, it doesn't work. So no, I think that's really helpful advice. So sticking with SMEs then, what can SMEs practically do in terms of putting together a D&I strategy?
I think they should start small and start from inclusion. And I think that means establishing the baseline, where you are, where you stand, what are kind of your particular pain points and challenges and also opportunities. And don't assume you know, ask your people. So as an SME, rather than, if you are a business leader, rather than thinking, okay, I know what the challenges really are around inclusion, ask your people what really matters to them, and what makes them feel excluded or included in this organization. So you might find out, for example, that parents and carers really struggle to contribute fully because the meetings which are scheduled happen to be at the time where they need to do pickups and drop-offs for the kids. It's an easy fix, just change the timing of that meeting, so you've resolved the pain point very quickly. So that's about, you know, starting small and starting from inclusion. Another example might be that you might find out by asking people that maybe one of your leaders is sharing jokes which are homophobic, and that makes people from those communities feel very disengaged, disappointed, and really hurt. And they are thinking about leaving the company. So how can you stop talent from leaving? Actually, there is a solution there in that. If you raise awareness around the inclusive language and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in your workplace, you can create more inclusion and therefore much more welcoming place in your small business. So yeah, start small, start from inclusion will probably be my first kind of point. And then I would say develop a specific business case for inclusion and diversity for your organization. So don't fall into the trap of copying and pasting from another company just because something worked somewhere else. It might not necessarily work in your business reality because every business is different and every business has got different challenges and operates maybe in slightly different marketplace. So establish your own business case, why you want to focus on inclusion and diversity. It will be much more authentic and therefore much more engaging for everybody concerned. And then set your aspirations. You know, what is it that you want to be famous for as a company? And think about your reputation. If you become an inclusive and equitable organization, more people want to come and work for you. You will be able to tap into greater talent. That talent will come up with lots of ideas for you, for your products, for your services. And that means your business will flourish, will boom. So think about your own kind of situation in your own specific business case, and then embed inclusion and diversity and equity throughout the whole of employee life cycle. So think about advertising, marketing and PR, think about recruitment and onboarding, think about your performance management, your reward packages and benefits, how inclusive and equitable they are. And because that systemic approach to diversity and inclusion, that kind of looking through systems and policies and experiences, will have a much more powerful and much more long-lasting impact on everybody who works for you and prospective hires. So yeah, those would probably be the steps I would focus on. And I would say focus on some of the quick wins. So some of the examples I gave you, just examples of very sort of quick wins that you can fix. And fixing those kind of quick issues will help you gain trust from people. People will actually think, yes, you are serious about this, and they will give you more opportunities to sort of to fix more things. It builds trust, it builds engagement, and creates momentum, but also have a much more longer term strategy of where you want to be with your organization across, you know, a number of months, or 12 months to 2 years perhaps.
I know we've talked about kind of authenticity and also making that when you put something together, it needs to be specific to you as an organization. But as examples, have you got any kind of things that you can share with us around, where you've seen really good D&I practices and you've seen really good things going well for people?
Where I've seen lots of progress within the inclusion and diversity is, I guess, by adopting that approach I was talking about. So asking people from within your company what's not working, what makes them feel included or excluded, and then really focusing on solving that. So without naming specific companies, one company has introduced a parental leave policy, which included everybody in the company, irrespective of how they became parents, whether they were adopting, whether they were the same sex partners, whether they happened to go through IVF and fertility. They had equal access, the same access to support, financial and mental health support, and other practical support from the organization. And that was identified as one of the kind of key issues that some groups of employees felt wasn't there because they couldn't access that before. So by asking the question, what makes you feel included or excluded, you can really drill down to what needs focusing on. And there's a number of companies, like small businesses, startups, especially in the sort of fintech area, for example, in creative space, which are doing some really good work around inclusion and diversity. And the way they're doing it is that by focusing on their specific issues and challenges and asking people what's not working, what's happening internally that we can fix. Because as business leaders, we can sometimes sort of think, oh, we know best. But actually we may not, because we may have certain privileges and certain advantages that got us to the positions where we are at, but others may not have the same experience, and understanding the difference is really important. And if you want to get some inspiration, there is some companies there's kind of membership bodies that produce index of most inclusive companies. So for example, a company called Inclusive Companies, every year they rank 50 companies in the UK as the most inclusive ones, and they talk about what practices they have implemented that year to make them that good. You can also go on Glassdoor, and Glassdoor now ranks people by their inclusion and diversity, and you can have a look at what companies are doing in that space. You can get some inspiration there, but I would say don't copy and paste. Don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, this worked for this company and we are quite similar, so let's just do this. You have to take into account your own business reality. So yeah, those two places are a good starting point for some inspiration, I would say.
Oh, amazing. That kind of feeds really nicely into my final question. I was going to ask you about kind of free resources and places that people can go, but I suppose those are two really key. Is there anywhere else people can get kind of free kind of advice, guidance, support in terms of starting to think about D&I?
I mean, free resources are everywhere. And I think LinkedIn is your best friend, really, when it comes to free resources, fact sheets, or some educational resources or training around inclusion and diversity. So there's a lot of education awareness, some free courses you can access. There's also lots of podcasts around diversity and inclusion. Two of my favorite ones are Element of Inclusion and Diversity podcast. So easy to remember, and they have a lot of, again, educational resources, but they talk about specific kind of case studies as well, or examples of what works, what doesn't work, some of the new developments in diversity and inclusion. And then other than that, I think CIPD, if you're a member of CIPD, or if you have somebody in the business who's a member of CIPD, they have a lot of fact sheets and toolkits, as does Business in the Community, which is a charity. And then speaking of charities, lots of charities that specialize in certain demographic groups have got some free sort of starter kits, as they call it, or resources. I think most recently, Business Disability Forum have launched their SME toolkit on how to attract and retain disabled talents. So it's also a good place to have a look at. So there's lots of resources out there, and you can follow people on social media. You can read their posts. You can listen to podcasts, tap into those websites and charities, and yeah, take your pick.
Amazing stuff. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really kind of educational and inspirational. I think there's lots in there that practically SMEs can have a look at and have a try at. And like you say, there's so many free resources out there to kind of help support on that journey. So thank you for taking the time. I was also super late. So thank you for being so gracious and waiting for me. I really, really appreciate it. For the listeners and watchers, as always, the podcast and our YouTube channel is for guidance only. There are some terms and conditions that you can have a look at on the website. Always get your own advice, but obviously Anita's advice is brilliant. But make sure that you do that too. So I will leave it there. Otherwise, we'll just sit and giggle and wear our uniforms. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Trish. I really enjoyed the conversation. And for anybody who wants to connect with me, find me on LinkedIn. Super easy. Just type in my name, Aneta Weedon, and you'll find me easy because I'm the only person with that name and a picture. So yeah, you can find me there.
Well, on anything that goes out, so the podcast or out of the YouTube, I'll make sure there's a link so that people can contact you easily. I totally forgot that bit. Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem.
Alrighty, we'll speak soon. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too. Bye.